On Primetime Politics, embracing the status quo.
But that'll happen with me as leader.
Justin Trudeau asserts his leadership over his party despite Wednesday's emotional caucus meeting. But now that the knives have been drawn, how effectively can Trudeau govern? We will speak to our Ottawa bureau chiefs. Also,
I can make anybody do anything through the use of tariffs.
With Republicans and Democrats embracing more protectionist rhetoric, we'll examine how Canada can maximize its competitive advantage and ensure Canadian industry is not shut out. Plus,
it's important that any plan that Canada puts in place is a realistic one that's achievable.
The UK's High Commissioner to Canada and what our closest allies are looking for from Canada. This is Primetime Politics. Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. As this week began in Ottawa, many were wondering what impact the Liberal caucus meeting would have on the Prime Minister, and as it turns out, not much.
United behind you?
The Liberal Party is strong and united.
Justin Trudeau emerged from that meeting on Wednesday full of bravado, despite hearing from several MPs reportedly about their disappointment in his leadership and despite a supposed Monday deadline for the Prime Minister to tender his resignation. But if leaving is on Justin Trudeau's mind, we've had no indication of it in his public statements.
We're going to continue to have great conversations about what is the best way to take on Pierre Poilievre in the next election, but that'll happen with me as leader going into the next election.
Well, to talk about the week, we're now joined by Bob Fife, Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail, Tonda MacCharles, Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, and Joël-Denis Bellavance, Ottawa Bureau Chief for La Presse. Hello to the three of you.
Hi there.
So very quickly, the Prime Minister comes out and says, no, I'm staying. I'm going to lead the Liberals into the next election. So how important now is this deadline given to him on the 28th, or is it not important anymore?
Well, he's been consistent in saying he's going to stay. He met with the caucus. The dissidents thought when they left that he was going to reflect as they were going to reflect, and they wanted him to come back on the 28th, and the next day he said, no, I'm staying. So it's a good question. We are going to watch to see what they're going to do. This is not an overly brave group of people. You know, we know there's 24, and 24 apparently have put their names on it, but 24 people have never told us really who they are. We know some of the people, but most of them we do not know. And neither does the Prime Minister's office, because they never put the letter with the names on it. So I think we're some ways from a full rebellion, but we are starting to see signs of more bravery on the part of Liberal MPs because the poll numbers are not changing, even though when we left that caucus meeting, some of them were coming out and saying, we got to get Poilievre, we're united, we got to get Poilievre. But unless those numbers change, I think you're just going to see more and more of this sort of dissension, and it'll probably grow.
Dissension and, again, unspecified consequences.
Well, I would just say that actually some of the numbers are shifting, which might be enough to allow Mr. Trudeau a little bit more time, because we have seen a couple of polls in the last week or so that show likability numbers for Mr. Poilievre going down. So, you know, does he get to then make his case? Does the Prime Minister get to make his case to say, I'm the one bringing that down? We're pointing out, you know, the risks of a Poilievre government. I'm not convinced like Bob. I think it's, you know, it's a significant number, 24, who say they've signed on. It's not to be dismissed, but I think the Prime Minister and his team feel like they've kind of beaten it back temporarily, or at least they think that they've answered the call for him to go by Monday, because he said, no, he's not, he's staying. But I don't think I think they ignore it at their peril. We also know, all of us, that there are people who didn't sign the letter who also believe he should go. So, you know, I use this analogy in our podcast. I really do think this is, you know, that was a flash fire for them Wednesday. They think they put it out, but there is a peat fire smoldering underground for this government, right? It's a significant number that they can't afford to see all walk out the door. So what's the or else on Monday? They all said you have to leave and trigger a leadership race by Monday, or then what? And that's the big question, isn't it? Unless any of you guys know. I don't think they're all going to form a separate caucus or a separate party or vote non-confidence in the PM.
To be able to have some leverage, you need a plan B if the plan A doesn't work. And that group, as Bob pointed out, is not well organized. We've seen putschists in the past, and they were more, well organized and well planned, and they were ultimately successful. This one may fizzle, but as Tonda pointed out, what's the plan B? Are they willing to sit as independent MPs, or are they willing to vote with the Tories and other opposition parties against the government? Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative Party leader, said that they had talks with some of the MPs, Liberal MPs, who are demanding Mr. Trudeau to quit. And he said that if there's a vote on the carbon tax to increase it again, they will vote with the Conservative Party. So it remains to be seen, but it's going to make sure that the situation will remain volatile for the Prime Minister in terms of his leadership.
And there's another aspect to this, is fundraising. Yeah. The Liberals are having, the Tories are way, way ahead in terms of fundraising. The Liberals are really not doing that well. And I've talked to a lot of Liberals who say, you know what, I'm not going to contribute any money until he goes. And that is a really powerful sign of dissatisfaction with Mr. Trudeau's leadership. And if that is as significant as perhaps people are suggesting, that is a real problem for them, because you need money to run election campaigns. You need money to run ads against Mr. Poilievre, who's been spending a fortune on advertising, not only on social media but in broadcasting. Just this week, you can, if any channel you turn on, there's a Poilievre ad.
French and English, I can testify to that. I saw the ads in French and English on Radio-Canada and CBC and Hockey Night in Canada and whatever you want.
In high the Liberals rotation. Say that's coming, right? So it remains to be seen if it's satisfactory enough for the dissidents, right? Is there a plan? I mean, Nate Erskine-Smith, the MP, came out after that caucus meeting and said that they didn't get a chance to hear what stage the planning is at, but many of them have been told that the ads are coming. Yeah. And is that going to be enough? Look, there's a lot of people there asking for changes in the cabinet. Will they do that sooner, or will they wait till after the election? Changes in policy approach, changes in the staffing at the PMO. Will we see that kind of change? That's not all on the Liberal Party. It's on the Prime Minister and his team
to has the PMO looked at the dissension and say it's not as large as we feared it is, and we can control it and continue to go forward?
They absolutely feel they dodged a bullet on Wednesday. That is the message that we took away from all our discussions, is that there was a sense that if there was ever a time that 40 MPs were going to come forward, that would have been it. But that wasn't the case either in the letter, 24 unnamed individuals, nor at the microphone in caucus. Some 20-ish went to the mic to say they didn't support the Prime Minister staying, various versions of that. But, another 20 to 25 said, enough, we support him.
We would have seen if they dodged the bullet, though, if they had a secret vote.
Yeah,
they didn't want to.
Exactly. Yes,
people were talking secret vote. But I do have to ask, though, because the argument we continue to hear from the Liberal government is we're going to show Canadians how well we govern, and the numbers are going to turn around. But how well can they govern? I'm thinking about the immigration announcement, just a couple of days ago. Here you have an important policy shift. And the questions were not about the policy shift. They were about Justin Trudeau's leadership. So how well can they show Canadians their effectiveness in government if they are overshadowed by continuing questions about the leader? That's challenging.
That's really the fundamental question, because as we know, when a party is divided and is fighting among themselves in public like that, you lose trust of Canadians. And no matter what you put out in the window, Canadians see the fights that they're showing. And not only that, but the opposition parties are taking a delight in seeing what's happening in the Liberal ranks. We heard Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative Party leader, Yves-François Blanchet, the Bloc Québécois leader, and the NDP leader, John Meeting, making hay out of the divisions within the Liberals. So out of this exercise, Mr. Trudeau may have dodged a bullet, but he came out of it weakened, and we expect more of that kind of dissensions to continue over the next few weeks, because I don't think that the government can fight what is very difficult to fight, which is voter fatigues with the government and the appetite for change.
And there's this deadline of the 28th on Monday, but there's also the Bloc Québécois deadline on the 29th. And so it's not as if the pressures from the other parties have lessened in this. So it makes me wonder, the episode that we saw this week, does that increase the likelihood of either prorogation or an early vote?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't think by the looks of things that we're going to see an early vote, but it's certainly possible. I would not rule out anything. But prorogation is an interesting thing because it's been talked about. Everybody's actually talking about it. If you run into anybody on the street, so what's he going to do? Is he going to stay, or is he either going to go? They're going to prorogue, right? That's what everybody's talking about. And I think that certainly is being seriously considered. But it's when you do it, because if you can wait until November to do it, then you can, prorogation should roughly be about a 3-month period of time. There is sort of an unofficial way of doing this for political reasons like this. So that would bring you into, say, February. You could have a throne speech and a budget, might get into an election by that period of time. So I do think it's still on the table, particularly because Parliament, which we haven't talked about, but is paralyzed. There's no business going on because they're having a fight over this green slush fund money. And even though most of the country doesn't know
But I think it is tempting for the Liberals to prorogue at a certain point. The question of timing is absolutely critical. But I think that, you know, the reset, when they come back, they will still be faced with a challenge to persuade Canadians that any throne speech or budget is bringing the change they desire. And yet, I bet he's pretty tempted. I wouldn't have been surprised, frankly. I was thinking they're going to prorogue on Thursday. Like after that caucus meeting, maybe press reset right now.
But it's a risky proposal because a speech from the throne is a vote of confidence, and you may not have the opportunity to table a budget afterwards. I talked to the Bloc Québécois.
It doesn't have to be, though. It doesn't have to be.
What, the speech from the throne?
A throne speech doesn't have to be.
Confidence vote?
Didn't Peter Van Loan one time do a
No, I think a throne speech is...
For sure?
Yeah, for sure, because you need the confidence of the House on that.
A fall economic statement does not have to
necessarily,
be, right?
depends. If you
they
have,
can get through that.
Yeah, but coming back to the ultimate of the Bloc Québécois, I talked to the Bloc Québécois and they mentioned to me that on Tuesday, Yves-François Blanchet will have a press conference to announce that it's game over, and then he will start discussions with the other parties to try to bring down the government. So that will make it officially two parties who won a federal election this fall, the Conservative Party and the Bloc Québécois.
The NDP don't, though.
It's the mystery card. What will the NDP do when faced with...
But the longer the NDP withholds, the weaker they get. Because they, even though they're out of this agreement, supply agreement with the government, if they continue to prop them up, they're going to look, as the Conservatives say, the NDP Liberal government, and that does not help the NDP. But of course, you can understand why they wouldn't. Look what happened in British Columbia. The NDP got wiped out in a lot of these ridings that they hold federally, provincially, but they would face the same fate federally.
Hoping to gain that federally, but you're right. Like it was a very tight election where the provincial Conservatives really rode on the coattails of Pierre Poilievre. So it's.
But then New Brunswick, what does that? You know, then the Liberals take a majority in New Brunswick, and a conservative.
But it was a conservative government and an unpopular one.
That is defeated. Yeah.
Very unpopular.
I think there are interesting messages from both those elections for the federal parties. You know, I think that the Liberals probably took. Well, they did say they took some solace from the New Brunswick result, but I think they've got to wonder if, you know, what's happening to the progressive vote in this country, and are they in the position to capitalize on it?
And the Liberal brand per se. I mean, the Liberal Party does not exist provincially in many provinces. In BC, Saskatchewan.
And where it does, they're not putting it on the signs.
No.
Well, and at the end of the day, if Justin Trudeau does not step aside, if he does not help usher in a different leadership, does that necessarily condemn the Liberal Party to lose another election, go into the wilderness for 10 years, and reformulate what they are?
Look, I mean, it all comes down to this. This is a vote on Justin Trudeau. And the polls have been very clear for well over a year that Canadians have had it with him. And I don't see how you can change that. And it's just the cycle of political life. It doesn't matter which political party you're in. You've been there for, 9 years, and people just don't want to see you anymore.
It's a tough proposition. Okay, well, we will watch what happens on Monday, Tuesday, this never-ending story that is Ottawa. Bob, Tonda, Joël-Denis, thank you very much.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Well, to the U.S. presidential race now, as we're in the second last weekend of campaigning, and the polls could not be any closer. The latest numbers coming to us from CNN. This was released on Friday, and it shows both candidates tied at 47% each in a survey of likely voters. And with a vote so close, the candidates, along with their surrogates, have been campaigning heavily in the key swing states. Well, as many Canadians keep a close eye on the race south of the border, our next guests are reminding us whoever wins the U.S. campaign, Democrat or Republican, Canada will likely face protectionist tendencies, policies that can hurt Canadian industries and the Canadian economy. Still, there are things they argue Canada can do, actions that can, quote, make Canada matter more to Americans. And with that, we're happy to be joined right now by Janice Stein, the founding director of the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, and Edward Greenspon, president and CEO of the Public Policy Forum. Two of my favorite people. Hello to both of you.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Well, nice to see you in studio. Listen, you know, it was interesting going through this report that you've put together for your respective organizations, co-writing it, because you identify protectionism in the United States, but you also say Canada contributes to the problem by not stepping up for economic opportunities and not stepping up to help our allies. Can you talk to us a bit about that, Janice?
I think you put your finger right on it, Michael, that we, one, are not confident enough about the assets we do have. That's something Kirsten Hillman, our ambassador in Washington, says all the time, that quiet confidence. Secondly, we're not strategic enough in saying these are really important assets. What can we do together with the United States? What can we co-invest in? What can we co-produce? Where can we partner on issues that are at the top of the agenda? We just came from a roundtable discussion on critical minerals. That is a national security issue in Washington right now. They are looking for trusted partners, but we have to deliver in a timely way, because that's what they're looking for.
Because if I'm quoting you to our audience here, you say if we want to make sure that Canada survives these protectionist tides, we need to prove to Americans and to all our allies that Canada is a reliable partner. But you know, Ed, Canada's failure, really, when you listen to Janice, it's a convergence of two things. It's an economic advantage, but it is also a security issue. Are those now the lenses through which Canada needs to be eyeing trade and saying to the world, this is why we're still relevant?
Yeah, it's almost a single lens. You know, we're in this kind of unusual situation where the geopolitics of the world, particularly the rivalry between China and the United States, but also Russia, Iran, the so-called new Axis powers, are forcing us ever more closely to the United States-led alliance. And it's never been as unstable, the United States, in terms of being in that alliance. But we have no choice. Those are our friends in the world. Those are the friends we have to sup with. So we have to deepen the relationship with the United States, let's say critical minerals, but we also have to be a provider to our friends in the world who don't want to be reliant on China and Russia. And to your earlier part of the conversation, to do that, we have to accelerate how we develop things. We are just way too slow, and that's why we're not reliable. It's not because we're bad people. You know, Canada's beloved among countries, but we're just don't have a sense of urgency.
Well, when you say that, and you note it in your report, I think about the German Chancellor coming to Canada saying that Germany needs liquefied natural gas, and immediately the answer was no. Talk to us about that kind of missed opportunity, that kind of thinking, Janice.
You know, that's such an important story in a way, Michael, because it covers almost all the issues we deal with in the report. These windows for Canada open, but don't stay open forever, right? Let's come back to a moment for critical minerals. We are the closest country to the United States that actually has a supply of some of the critical minerals that the United States will need. China controls 87% of the processing of critical minerals. And those critical minerals processed are in everything, in computers, in the digital world, you know, in scientific research and development. They are really important to everything. Well, how long is this window going to be open? The United States is already seized with a sense of urgency. Latin America is not a good choice for them because Chinese investment is moving in at a rapid pace. But if we take 10 years or 15 years to permit something, Michael, that is not the pace at which the United States moves. It's just not.
And if we could just build on that for a second, you know, at 87%, that's twice as much as OPEC's control of oil at its height, when it was imposing embargoes and it was dictating the price to the world by controlling supply. And that's what China's doing. And in doing it, they discourage us from investing. So we got to figure that out. If the market signals that are manipulated from China tell us don't invest in critical minerals, but the security signals in the world say do invest, then that's where public policy has to step in.
You know, Janice and you've mentioned some of the areas in which Canada can have this comparative advantage, critical minerals being one. What else are you identifying?
Yeah, so I just say we have Arctic security, and when we identify them, we're identifying here's where we can do things together. The North really matters now. It is a frontline place, and all the northern countries that are not Russia are all in NATO now, with Finland and Sweden come. So we have an opportunity to do things together broadly and with the United States. Critical minerals, as you say, energy, uranium is a great example. The United States is highly dependent still on Russia and its client states for uranium. Canada is the other big producer in the world. So just like the Chancellor from Germany came here, everybody's coming. What can we do in uranium? What can we do in nuclear? Canada is powerful there. And finally, technology. There's some advanced technologies where we are good, and we need to, you know, you're not going to matter in the world if you don't matter in AI. So we need to make sure we matter.
You know, Janice, you talk about speed, but the other challenge here is money. Like, none of this stuff is going to come cheap. I think about critical minerals alone and the Ring of Fire, and there is no road right now to the Ring of Fire. Talk to us about the money challenge, because it's not like governments are stepping forward to say, we're awash with cash, we're going to make this happen.
No, we know our government is not awash with cash, and our government debt is high right now, Michael, and that's not going away. But that having been said, you still have to make the strategic investment. So, in the North, in the Arctic, where fundamentally our Arctic now is undefended, and we are a frontline state to to Russia, there is no higher priority in Washington than Canada stepping up and doing what it needs to do. We got a defense update, which is in the right focus, the right direction, but, you know, back-end loaded, most of it. And so the United States, in a sense, what you feel is this frustration because the United States looks at our Arctic and says, it's wide open, we can't do it. That's what we want you to do more than anything else. Then we have to build the infrastructure. We have to build the infrastructure that connects the roads to the Ring of Fire. That's when public sector partners with private sector de-risked some of this over the long term, because that's what every other government is now doing.
And you know, you talk about the North, and I was talking to the UK High Commissioner to Canada, saying it's not just the United States that's looking for the specialization from Canada. NATO is looking for the specialization.
You know, the Arctic is a NATO lake. Except for Russia. That's how we have to think about it.
And it's a technology play in the modern world. It's like having sensors. We're good in space, having sensors in space, having sensors underwater. This is where the technology and all the other pieces actually come together.
Okay, quickly running out of time, but a quick answer from the two of you. You've put together this policy paper. There's no guarantee that someone's going to pick up this policy paper. What's your fear if officials, leaders, business, political, otherwise, don't listen to this economic advantage you see for Canada?
Well, I can tell you I worry that our productivity will continue to decline, Michael. Our standard of living will continue to drop. And so I have a redoubled sense of urgency. You know, there was a transition coming in the United States. The free trade agreement, CUSMA, NAFTA, however you want to call it, is coming up for revision. It doesn't matter who's president. That will focus the mind of Canadians. Let's go back to the fundamental factor here, Michael. 78% of our exports go to the United States.
Quickly,
and Canadians like to be good allies. They like to be engaged in the world, and this is an opportunity. So if leaders fumble on this, we will both have the economic consequences, but Canadians will also feel cheated that there are those opportunities of German chancellors coming over and Korean prime ministers and others saying, help us, and we will not have risen to the occasion, and so we will have let down the world. The world actually does now kind of, in a way, need Canada. for the 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 things that we're exceptionally good at and good alternatives to China and Russia. And we don't step up, I think Canadians will be deeply disappointed.
May I borrow that? Because if people want to learn more about it, you can look at the policy paper in the Public Policy Forum. Ed, Janice, really appreciate the time. Thank you for this.
Such a pleasure to be with you, Michael.
And you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Well, let's pick up on the Arctic defense component, because as I said, I did talk about that with the British High Commissioner to Canada, and here's what she said about its importance to our allies.
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of concerns. I mean, it's specifically concerns related to climate change, which are most evident in the North. So, first of all, I would say that the Arctic, as we know, is warming 4 times faster than anywhere else in the world, and so scientists now predict that we're looking at a minimum sea level rise of 27 centimetres. That in itself is going to have security impacts, because that's going to cause all kinds of problems for countries around the world, some of which see their very future and existence threatened by that. Second of all, the Arctic is going to change because of the melting sea, and so the opening up of different routes, and that will lead to greater competition for resources. So 22% of the untapped oil reserves are in the Arctic, for example. And so we can certainly expect to see the Arctic, which has traditionally been an area of high collaboration, low conflict, move away from that. And we must ask ourselves, are we prepared for the Arctic to become somewhere where conflict is more present and more of a real threat?
Is that a specific reference to Russia or China?
Well, I don't know that we need to make references to specific countries. Russia obviously has very legitimate interests in the Arctic. It's an Arctic state. At the same time, there is increasing Russian military activity in the Arctic. They have re-established some of their Cold War era bases there, and so we would be right to be thinking about what that looks like and to be asking ourselves how we're going to really ensure that we're protecting ourselves. And in that sense, we were very pleased to see in Canada's defence policy update a really strong focus on the Arctic, which I know was really welcomed by all of the allies.
And is that because that is the front that the allies see Canada essentially specializing in, given the fact that the UK and all of Europe are now facing Russian aggression on another front?
Well, that's right. So the point of an alliance is about burden sharing. We don't all need to do everything. And so within any alliance, we should think about how we're playing to our different strengths, different expertise. And Canada obviously has tremendous expertise in the Arctic. And so it's really welcome that the Defence Policy Update was really clear about this focus on the Arctic. And we look forward to seeing what that will mean over the next few years.
And our thanks to Susannah Goshko, the British High Commissioner to Canada. For our full conversation, you can tune into Profile. We go on to talk about Canada and the UK's shared interests in the environment, global security, and industry. Profile airs this weekend on CPAC, and you can see the times right there. You can also stream it on cpac.ca. Well, that is our program for now. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. I'm Michael Serapio. Primetime Politics is back next week. Until then, take care and have a great weekend.